knew the precise second the company's fate was sealed. It wasn't when the stock price dipped. It wasn't when management replaced the break room coffee with some organic sludge that tasted like filtered regret. It was when Jared walked into the room. Jared was the new CTO, 28 years old. A venture capital science experiment stuffed into a tailored vest, radiating sandalwood startup jargon, and the kind of confidence that only comes from never having paid for your own mistakes. He entered the conference room like a prophet parting the sea, except the sea was a group of exhausted, middle-aged engineers silently praying for severance packages and decent health insurance. He was sitting in the corner with a styrofoam cup of lukewarm bean water, watching him take inventory of the room like a landlord inspecting a condemned building. He'd been here 6 years, 6 tech years, which might as well make me a fossil encased in sedimentary rock. I was the ghost in the machine. The unseen reason the servers didn't combust every Black Friday. To Jared, though, I was just a woman in a hoodie, someone who looked like she needed sleep, nicotine, and fewer meetings. By the way, quick interruption. If you enjoy stories where arrogant corporate frat boys get dismantled by the people they underestimate, do me a favor. Hit subscribe. Upvote. It fuels my spite and helps me justify buying calming herbal tea that I definitely spike with whiskey. Appreciate you. All right, team, Jared announced, clapping his hands together like a seal demanding a fish. I've been reviewing the architecture, and honestly, it's a mess. Poor legacy garbage. We're pivoting to a microservices-first, AI-driven ecosystem by K3. He flicked a slide onto the projector. It was a disaster. Circles, arrows, buzzwords. It looked like a football play drawn by a caffeinated toddler on Adderall. I leaned forward, squinting. What he was proposing wasn't a refactor. It was an execution. He planned to remove the central logic gate of our entire logistics platform. That legacy garbage, that was quantum ops. That was my work. He built it during the 2020 logistics apocalypse, fueled by insomnia, caffeine, and the low-grade terror of watching global supply chains collapse in real time. That code kept this company alive when everyone else was bleeding cash and praying to spreadsheets. "Excuse me," I said. My voice came out rough. I hadn't spoken in a meeting in 3 months. Heads turned. "That module handles 90% of vendor compliance," I continued. "You delete it, and you're not pivoting. You're lobotomizing the company." Jared turned slowly, his expression carefully rehearsed. The smile didn't touch his eyes, the kind you perfect while listening to motivational podcasts and practicing in the mirror. He scanned my messy bun, my faded Nostromo Crew t-shirt. Then he checked his Apple Watch. "And you are?" he asked, pretending not to know. He absolutely knew. I was the mysterious budget line item the CFO couldn't explain but was too afraid to cut. "I'm Emily," I said. "You built the backbone you're trying to remove." Jared laughed, not a real laugh. Something damp and dismissive. "Right, Emily." "Look, sweetheart," he said, leaning back. "I appreciate what you did back in the day, but this isn't a museum. We're building the future. And frankly, your monolithic code is holding us hostage. We need agility, velocity, this patchwork," he gestured vaguely. "We don't need it." The word sweetheart lingered in the air like a bad smell in an elevator. The other engineers avoided eye contact. They knew exactly who I was. They knew I wasn't just the architect. They also knew I technically wasn't even an employee. But Jared didn't. Jared saw a tired, middle-aged woman and assumed legacy hire, a diversity checkbox from another era. He thought he was scrapping an obsolete part. What he didn't realize was that he was trying to evict the landlord while still living in the house. Back in 2018, when this company was just lawsuits, duct tape, and ambition, they couldn't afford me. He was a mercenary developer with a rate that made CFO us sweat. I saw my lawyer, Heavy Metal Dave, a legal shark operating out of a strip mall next to a vape shop, engineered a workaround. He never signed an employment contract. I signed a licensing agreement. I formed my own LLC, Ironclad Logits, and licensed Quantum Ops to them. Like Adobe, like Microsoft, you don't own it, you rent it. And like any landlord with terrible tenants, I kept the key. Jared, however, was too busy admiring his reflection in the glass whiteboard to do any actual due diligence. "All right," I said finally, leaning back as the cheap chair creaked. "Agility, velocity, sounds great." He smirked and turned back to his chaos diagram. "We'll begin sunsetting the old modules immediately. HR will handle restructuring to align with the new vision. Restructuring. Corporate for cutting the people who actually know how the lights work." I didn't argue. I didn't throw my coffee, though my hand twitched. I just sat there, calm in a way that only comes from experience. When you've survived long enough, you don't panic when a rookie pulls the pin. You just check your watch and calculate the blast radius. He glanced at my phone. 4 days. That's when the licensing contract renewed, unless contested. Paragraph 4 spelled out what happens if the licensee modifies or disparages the software. Paragraph 6? Paragraph 6 was nuclear. Jared wrapped up with a cheerful "let's crush it" team and marched out, probably to celebrate with kale and self-congratulation. I stayed seated. A junior dev named Mike leaned over, whispering, "Emily, are you okay? He's going to cut you." He crushed my styrofoam cup and tossed it cleanly into the recycling bin. "Don't worry about me," I said. "If you see me leaving with a box later this week, don't help. Just update your resume." Then I logged into my real console. Not the company one. The private server in a basement in Estonia that I paid $50 a month to maintain. Jared wanted a revolution. He was about to get a revelation. The freeze-out didn't come like a guillotine. It arrived the way black mold does, quiet, creeping, and suddenly everywhere once you notice it. It started with calendar invites. The weekly architecture sync vanished from my Outlook like it had never existed. Then the strategy alignment meeting disappeared. Then the leadership check-in. Meetings it either built, led, or quietly carried for years evaporated in a day, and nobody asked why. Nobody pinged me. Nobody said, "Hey, weird, your name isn't on this anymore." They just let it happen. He sat in my cube, well, my leased workspace technically, and listened to laughter leaking through the glass walls of the conference room 10 feet away. Jared was in there holding court, arms wide, voice loud, performing competence like it was a TED Talk. Through the glass, I watched him point at the whiteboard I used to own. He used to fill it with real diagrams, functional flows, edge cases, data pathways, the boring bones that keep a platform upright. Jared erased my work like it offended him. Then he replaced it with phrases like holistic synergy, cloud-native mindset, and velocity culture. Words that mean nothing except, I want credit without responsibility. It's funny how fast you become invisible. 6 years of 80-hour weeks. 6 years of waking up at 3 a.m. to patch some server leak so the CEO could wake up refreshed and buy his third boat. 6 years of carrying a system on my back like a pack mule with a laptop. And suddenly, I was a ghost. People I'd had lunch with for years started avoiding eye contact in the hallway. They'd glance at me, then look away like I was contagious. In corporate America, a firing is treated like a virus. If you stand too close to the victim, management might decide you're part of the infection. By Tuesday, Jared introduced reinforcements. "Team, meet Tyler," he announced, beaming like he'd just adopted a rescue puppy. "He's our new product evangelist. He'll be spearheading the transition to the new stack." Tyler looked 12, not metaphorically, literally like a kid who still needed permission to cross the street. He wore a pristine white sneakers that had never touched a dirty server room floor. He carried a matcha latte with foam art on top like it was a status symbol. He wandered over to my desk like a golden retriever who'd peed on the rug but still expected praise. "Hey, Emily, right?" he said, bright and eager. "Jared told me you're the legacy historian." Historian. I stared at him for a second, letting the word settle into my bloodstream like poison. "I'd love to pick your brain about the old code," Tyler continued. "Before we deprecate it, historian. Deprecate." He turned my chair slowly, like a villain in an old movie. "Tyler," I said, "do you know what a load balancer is?" He blinked, still smiling. "Well, yeah, conceptually, we use AWS for that, right? It's all serverless now. Serverless." I turned back to my monitors. "Right," I said, deadpan. "Serverless." Because the cloud is just magic sky pixie dust, not actual hardware running in a warehouse in Virginia that melts when you don't optimize your queries. He stood there, smile wobbling, unsure if I was joking. "Good luck," I added, because I'm not cruel, not always. He wandered away, confused and slightly deflated. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He wasn't the enemy. He was the sacrificial lamb Jared had tossed into a minefield with a map drawn in crayon. By Thursday, the knife got sharper. My staging access disappeared. Just gone. I tried to log in and got the digital equivalent of a slammed door. A generic system email followed 10 minutes later. "Permissions updated by admin. Jade something. No explanation. No ticket. No message. Nothing." I didn't fight it. I didn't march into Jared's office demanding answers. That's what they expect. Emotion. Chaos. Something they can label unprofessional. Instead, I opened my personal laptop, my beat-up Lenovo, the one I trusted more than any corporate-issued machine, the one that didn't belong to them. And I logged into the bank account for Ironclad Logic, LLC. It was the first of the month. Quarterly licensing payment was due at midnight. Usually Marcus, the old CFO who actually understood what a contract was, had it set to autopay. Marcus also got restructured last month, which is corporate slang for thrown off the boat, so the new captain can pretend the ship is lighter. I refreshed the page. No pending transaction. I refreshed again. Still nothing. An hour later, nothing. He sat there with the monitor's blue glow reflected in my glasses, feeling a weird cocktail of adrenaline and calm. Like standing on a shoreline and watching a tidal wave form far out at sea. It was happening. They were ghosting the payment. In their arrogance, they assumed that because I sat in a cubicle and collected a paycheck, really, a retainer disguised as payroll. For their tax convenience, they could skip the vendor invoice. They believed the salary meant they owned me. And if they owned me, then they owned the code. I pulled up the contract. Digital copy, yes. But I also had the original, wet ink, founder signature, locked in a fireproof box at home. Because I don't build systems that rely on good faith. Clause 3.1. Payment obligations. Failure to remit licensing fees within 24 hours of the due date constituted material breach. Clause 3.2. Cure period. No cure period for willful non-payment. And no cure period for unauthorized modification of source material. Jared had already violated the unauthorized modification clause by trying to bolt his shiny microservices nonsense onto my core without the API keys. And now he was about to violate the payment clause too. I could have walked into his office, warned him. Saeed, hey, Slick, you're about to default on the software that runs your inventory system. I could have saved them. But then I remembered Sweetheart. I remembered the laugh, the casual cruelty, the way he'd looked at me like an outdated couch he couldn't wait to drag to the curb. So I let the clock tick. Friday afternoon, right on schedule. HR sent me a calendar invite. Subject, quick sync time, 4:30 p.m. Location, meeting room B, the classic move. End of day Friday. Fire the person when they can't stir up trouble. Let the rest of the staff have a weekend to forget they existed. I started packing. Not much, some photos, my lucky screwdriver set, and a stubborn little succulent that had survived years of recycled office air and fluorescent lighting. I wiped my company-issued laptop clean, not just deleting, scrubbing, military grade. Not because I had something to hide, because I'm a professional and I don't leave fingerprints on machines that aren't mine. Then I checked the bank account one more time. Still zero. I stood up, put on my jacket, and picked up the manila folder I'd brought from home. Inside, the licensing contract was highlighted so aggressively in neon yellow, it looked like a crime scene. It was time to visit the principal's office. Meeting room B was designed as a glass aquarium, a corporate fishbowl. Position it right by the elevator so everyone could watch you get executed on your way out. Transparency, they called it. Accountability. In reality, it was same as interior design. Jared was already there when I walked in, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, vest pressed, posture calibrated for dominance. He looked like he was posing for a magazine cover titled Disruptors under Treats It. Sitting at the table was Brenda from. Brenda was a kind woman. The kind who communicated entirely through apologetic smiles and pamphlets about Cobra insurance. She looked like she'd rather be literally anywhere else, possibly underwater. Have a seat, Emily, Brenda said gently, like she was talking to a nervous horse. I sat down and placed the manila folder neatly on the table. Jared's eyes flicked to it. He smirked. He probably assumed it was a desperate attempt. Charts, diagrams, proof of value. Something he could dismiss with a buzzword and a shrug. He didn't even let Brenda speak. We've been evaluating the team structure, Jared began, passing slightly, performing concern. And as we transition into this high-velocity, cloud-native future, we've found that your skill set no longer aligns with the trajectory of quantum ops. Trajectory, I repeated, nodding slowly. His jaw tightened. We're terminating your employment, he said sharply, effective immediately. Brenda has the paperwork. Standard severance. 2 weeks. We'll need your badge and laptop. Brenda slid a thin stack of papers across the table, eyes down. We'll also need you to sign the NDA and non-disparagement agreement to receive severance, she added quietly. I didn't touch the papers. He looked at Jared. Just so we're clear, I said, voice steady, low. You're terminating our professional relationship completely. That's what fired means, sweetheart, he snapped. There it was again. Okay, I said. I reached into my pocket and placed my badge on the table. Then I pulled the company laptop from my bag and set it next to it. I'm no longer an employee, I said calmly. Good, Jarrett replied, pushing off the wall. Security will escort you out. Wait, I said. I rested my hand on the manila folder. We're done discussing employment, I continued. Now we need to talk about the vendor relationship. Jarrett frowned. What are you talking about? He opened the folder and slid the licensing agreement across the table. Quantum Ops Core Platform, signed in 2018. Auto-renewed quarterly. I don't work for you, Jarrett, I said. He never really did. My company, Ironclad Logits, licenses the software that runs your logistics, procurement, and vendor payments. I was just on-site support. Premium tier. Jarrett laughed. Actually laughed. He picked up the contract, skimmed the cover, and tossed it back like it was a napkin. This is ancient startup paperwork, he scoffed. We own everything you wrote while you were here. IP assignment, standard. Read paragraph 4, I said. He hesitated, then scanned it. All code, architecture, and algorithms remain the sole property of the licensor, Ironclad Logic. Licensee is granted a non-exclusive, revocable right to use the software contingent upon timely payment and adherence to usage guidelines. He watched his eyes move. I saw the moment his brain refused to accept the words. This is bullshit, he spat. You were on payroll. That voids this. Check with legal, I replied. He was on a 1099 retainer for 2 years, then moved to 2 for administrative convenience. Per addendum, signed by the founder. IP rights were never transferred. Ironclad Logic holds the copyright. I stood up. Here's the situation, I said evenly. You just fired the on-site support. Fine. I was tired of the coffee anyway. But you also missed the quarterly licensing payment. I'm not paying you, Jarrett snapped. This is extortion. It's a contract, I said. And since you breached it, the license is now invalid. Get out before I call the cops, he yelled. Okay. I walked to the door, then paused. Brenda, he said gently, you might want to print hard copies of payroll data. Just a suggestion. I turned back to Jared. Clause 6, I said. Unauthorized use after breach results in immediate suspension of service. You have 72 hours to cure, but since you just fired the only person who knows how the engine runs, I'd say less. Get out, he shouted. He left. I passed my desk. Tyler was typing furiously at nothing. The break room smelled like burnt coffee and panic. He walked into the parking lot, humidity pressing down like a hand on my chest. I lit a cigarette. My first in 6 months. It tasted like freedom. I climbed into my battered Ford F-150, tossed the folder onto the passenger seat, and drove straight to the liquor store. Not the classy one. The one with bulletproof glass and a cashier named Sal, who doesn't judge when you buy a handle of whiskey at 4:45 p.m., Old Crow. It tasted like gasoline and regret. Perfect. Back home, in my one-bedroom apartment that smelled of nag shampoo and soldering flux. I set up my command center. I wasn't hacking anything. Hacking is illegal. This was contractual enforcement. I logged into the Ironclad Logic remote admin panel. Quantum Ops servers pinged mine every hour. Am I allowed to run? For 6 years, my server answered, yes. He poured a glass of whiskey and watched the status lights glow green. License status. Grace period grace ends. 48 hours. I switched it to strict enforcement. Then I queued the command. Revoke license key. I didn't press enter yet. I wanted to give them the weekend. I let them have the weekend. I imagined Jared at brunch, clinking glasses, bragging about how he'd trimmed the fat at work. He pictured him nodding along while someone praised his leadership, never suspecting the building was already wired to collapse. I didn't spend the weekend plotting. I slept deep, dreamless sleep, the kind you forget exists when you're constantly on call. He went to a diner and ate greasy eggs that soaked through the toast. I didn't check my email. He ignored the automated alerts that started hitting my burner phone, sometimes Sunday afternoon, when the system noticed the licensed server had gone quiet. Sunday night, the bottle of Old Crow was half empty, and my resolve was full. Monday morning, 7:55 a.m. Quantum Ops would be waking up. Warehouse teams in state and in Nevada would be logging in to clear weekend orders. Procurement bots would be preparing to move millions of dollars worth of inventory. He sat at my kitchen table, coffee in one hand, mouse in the other. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is vandalism. This was business. This was a landlord changing the locks on a tenant who stopped paying rent. I whispered to the empty room. Paragraph 4. Then I hit enter. The dashboard flickered. Green lights turned red. Inventory modula. Unlicensed vendor API. Access denied Pyrrole Gateway. Critical failure. The cascade of red text filled the screen. It was beautiful. Industrial. Precise. The visual definition of consequences. The whiskey went down smoother this time. The silence didn't last. At 8:03 a.m., my phone buzzed, not Jared, but the automated PagerDuty bot had forgotten to unsubscribe from. Sev 1. Critical outage error code 42. Payment required. I'd repurposed that code years ago for fun. He wondered if anyone there was smart enough to Google it. At 8:15, the phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Again. I pictured the chaos. Warehouse scanners refusing to authenticate. Trucks lining up with empty manifests. Customer service lines lighting up like a Christmas tree made of panic. At 8:30, Mike texted, Mike, everything is down, everything. Mike, the dashboard just says, please contact administrator. Mike, Jared is screaming at the servers. He kicked a rack. I smiled, chewing cold toast. Kicking hardware, the universal sign of a man who has no idea how software works. At 9:00 a.m., the phone rang again. This time the caller ID said Quantum Ops HQ. I answered and put it on speaker while watering my succulent. Hello? I said, yawning. Emily, this is Jared, he said. His voice was higher, tight, like the vest was finally choking him. We have a situation. Who? I asked. Jared. The CTO. The system is down. All of it. We think it's a logic bomb. Did you leave something running? I don't work there anymore, I said calmly. Don't play games, he shouted. It says license invalid. What did you do? Oh, I said, feigning realization. The license. Did you pay the invoice? We're not paying that, he snapped. It's extortion. It's a contract, I replied. And since you breached it, the software defaulted to off. Turn it back on, he demanded, now, or I'll sue you into the ground. Jared, he said quietly, unauthorized use of proprietary software is a DMCA violation. Federal crime. Do you look good in orange? Silence. Then muffled voices. Legal, I guessed. Just fix it, he pleaded. We're losing $10,000 a minute. That sounds like a you problem, I said. I'm unemployed. What do you want? I want the CEO on the phone. He's in a board meeting. Drag him out, I said. Because in 10 minutes, your vendor autopay is going to fail, and your supply chain will be dead by lunch. A pause. Running footsteps. Panic. I sipped my coffee. A new voice came on the line. Deep, strained. Emily, Richard said. What the hell is happening? Morning, Richard, I said. Your CTO evicted your landlord. He tried the family card immediately. Emotions are high, he said. Jared made a mistake. We can fix this. Turn it back on, and we'll talk compensation. I don't want a raise, I said. I don't want my job back. Then what do you want? You have two options. I let the silence stretch. Option A, build your new system. Jared seems confident. We can't, Richard snapped. Option B, you buy the EP, one-time transfer. You own it. I walk away. How much? 2.6 million. That's insane. It's 1% of the revenue. My code saved you, I said. Plus a nuisance fee. We need time. You have 59 minutes, I said. The compliance purge starts in an hour. I hung up. He watched the clock like a cardiologist monitors a failing heart. 10:45. 15 minutes left on the imaginary purge timer, which was really just a script archiving data to cold storage. But they didn't need to know that. Fear is more effective when it's technically plausible. My phone buzzed nonstop. Mike was live blogging the apocalypse from the server room. Mike, 10:15 a.m. It's bad. Legal is screaming at Jared. Mike, 10:22 a.m. They found the contract. General counsel asked Jared if he can read. Mike, 10:35 a.m. Jared is crying. Actual tears. He said you sabotaged us. Mike, 10:36 a.m. Richard threw a stapler. I leaned back in my chair and waited. At 10:48, the call came. Not Richard, but legal. Emily, Sharon said. Her voice was calm, clipped, exhausted. The sound of someone cleaning up a mess made by an overconfident child. We've reviewed the agreement. Paragraph 4, I asked. And 6. And the addendum, she said. It's tight. I have a good lawyer, he can see that. She paused. Richard is prepared to sign. We need confirmation the system comes back online immediately. The second the wire clears, I said. I update the license to perpetual. Lights go green. And no data loss. No data loss, a beat. Wire is being sent now. I opened my banking app. For a moment, nothing. Then, pending transaction. $2,600 source. Quantum ops, ins there it was. It felt unreal, like watching a number flicker in a video game HUD. Enough money to stop surviving and start choosing. It's there, I said. Proceed, Sharon replied. I ended the call, opened my terminal, and typed the commands I'd written years ago, never expecting to use them. Update license status. Perpetual console purge sequence. I hit enter. 2 minutes later, Mike texted. Mike, we're green. Everything's coming back. People are cheering. Mike, it's like Apollo 13 in here. I didn't cheer. The adrenaline drained all at once, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. The kind that comes after a long war you didn't realize you were still fighting. I'd won. It humiliated the culture that tried to erase me. It secured my future. But I also knew something else. I was done. I could never work there again. Word would spread. They wouldn't tell the story about how they didn't pay their vendor. They'd tell the story about how I was dangerous. I was fine with that. He looked at the half-empty bottle of Old Crow, then poured the rest down the sink. I deserved better whiskey. Before leaving, I sent one last email to Jarrett. Subject: transition handoff body. The keys are under the mat. Try not to burn the house down. PS: the legacy garbage. Cost you $26 million. Might want to respect the code next time, sweetheart. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the lobby of Apex Logistics, Quantum Ops' biggest competitor. Bigger, meaner, smarter. He wasn't wearing a hoodie this time. I wore a blazer. I looked expensive. Stan, the director of engineering, greeted me with a grin. Rumor says you burned Quantum Ops down and sold them the ashes. I enforced the contract, I said. Strictly business. He laughed. We like business. In his office, he didn't waste time. Well, here you built the only vendor compliance system that actually works. It's grave theory and catching, I said. Not magic. Can you build it for us? I can't give you that code, I said. He sold it. He respect contracts. He frowned, until I slid another folder across the desk. That code is 6 years old. I continued. Java 8. Legacy. You've been sketching something new. Rust. High concurrency. Faster. Cleaner. His eyes lit up. How long? 6 months. With a team. And autonomy. And the price? Consulting fee, I said, plus equity. He stood and extended his hand. Welcome to Apex. 6 months later, Apex Prime launched. It crushed the market. Quantum Ops stock 40%. They were stuck with a system they barely understood, maintained by terrified juniors afraid to touch a line of code. Jared wasn't fired. Of course not. He was reassigned to special projects, corporate for don't touch anything sharp. I heard he eventually quit. Pivoted to crypto evangelism. It fit. As for me, I'm sitting in my renovated living room now. Expensive candles. A Checkmate TV dedicated entirely to Danny DeVito movies. The manila folder is framed on my wall. Paragraph 4. The paragraph that bought this house. So, if someone in a fleece vest ever calls your work legacy garbage, don't yell. Just make sure you own the keys. And if you have to burn the house down, charge them for the matches.